3-year, again, looking at those statutory aligned compliance and academic and financial standards. And then finally, for those schools where a non-renewal or an assumption is recommended, these are for those schools that have persistent patterns of compliance issues and financial and academic concerns. The last language included in the policy is that any renewal can be revoked according to state board policy, and also that the state board and CSAB reserve the right to add stipulations to any renewal period. Are there any questions?
Questions from my colleagues?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
The 5% comparable definition you have.
Yes.
And I think the idea there is, if I understand correctly, is it's not a reason for further going into it. It's just 5% of what the LEA results are in the same.
Yes, and there's no, the statute uses the word comparable, but it is not defined. And so this is kind of, the CSAB has been using this 5% as the comparable. So it's kind of based on current practice.
I'm aware of some counties where of course, not every county has a charter school, and then there's some counties that may have multiple. So there's variations here. And I'm aware of some counties where the demographics of the charter school are demonstrably different than the demographics of the LEA as a whole. And so, with that thought in mind, I'm wondering if the comparable is to the whole district, or to try to find a demographically comparable set of schools within the district to make that comparison.
I think that would go back to where these are, like for this Charter School Advisory Board, these stand as guidelines. So in those cases, they would be taking these guidelines that they've set out and they use when they're going through the renewal process, but it's not always set in stone. There might be other factors that they're looking at, such as differences in the district versus the charter school demographics. Did that help?
No,
Not really.
She answered my question. She
Yeah.
did a fine job. So yes,
Proof
if
is
it
just
helped to
doesn't
get an
fit
answer
the
at that point, it would just be making statements and try to figure out.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I just want to share great work on this, particularly work done by the CSAB to provide a structure and a rubric and really a better communication tool for the charter schools who are up for renewal, so that when those measurements and that discussion is had with those schools, it's not a surprise to them that these are the requirements set forth by the state in order for them to gain that renewal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
This will be up back to us next month. Okay, and so we will move on to EICS 2, the Innovative School Districts list of qualifying schools and schools under consideration for selection. We have Dr. Eric Hall, our Deputy State Superintendent of Innovation and the Innovative School District Superintendent. We hope you don't have to wear your bulletproof vest for this one.
Probably should have worked for the last one, but again, it's a pleasure to stand before you today and to kind of talk about what we're getting ready to kind of launch and embark upon for this next year. It's hard to believe it's been 1 year since we released the first list of qualifying schools for the ISD, and here we are 1 year later with a great school down at Southside Ashpole in Roland, a community that has come together, and I'll share more about that in a few minutes. But it's been a great journey, you know, and I think in this next round you're going to see some things that have kind of evolved over this past year and some lessons learned, and hopefully being able to spend some more time in the local communities as we move into this next round of selection. I always like to start when we start getting into this point about school selection, about really and truly what are we doing. We are here as a statewide school system under the administration of the State Board of Education and the State Superintendent as the 116th LEA in North Carolina. So as a school district that is serving the entire statewide community, our task is going in, partnering with local communities, partnering with the districts, and looking at how do we create innovative conditions in partnership with several to try to change outcomes in schools. And I think we've got a great proof point with the work that's been done at Southside Ashpole, as we've now got almost 2 weeks under our belt with the first opening of our first ever innovative school here in the state. And so I'm proud of that work, but I'm also proud of what's been happening across the state with our local districts that have been working with us hand in hand in this process. You know, when we go back to the statute and what really defines what qualifies a school for being an ISD school in the state, we look at, by statutory guidelines, it's a school in the lowest 5% of all schools in the prior school year. It includes all or part of grades K through 5. And you may remember that doesn't mean just grades K through 5. It means that we could see some schools that qualify that are K through 12. We could see schools that are 5 through 8 because they have parts of, you know, again, that criteria. We're also looking over the last 3 years at schools that did not exceed growth in at least one of the prior 3 years and did not meet growth in at least one of those prior 3 school years. And then that last bullet on there is a school that did not adopt one of the established reform models. And to me, this is a true testament of what our districts and schools locally have been doing over the past 12 months and really the last couple of years, is embarking on this journey with using the restart model to try to do some things, to innovate and try some different strategies with the flexibilities that are afforded oftentimes to our charter schools. So to me, that's the exciting work, and I think you're going to see some numbers in a second that show the work and the effort that's been going on across the state in this strategy. So we also have to include rural and urban schools. Last year, our first school, Roland, is definitely a very rural area, but what we're looking at is how criteria is established in the EDDI system and how schools are identified as either urban and rural. And so something you're going to see in just a couple minutes is that this year, I've divided out the list of qualifying schools to have one list that is rural and one list that is urban. You're also going to see that, if you recall from last year, we put out a list of 48 schools representing 21 districts in the state that qualified in our first year. Well, I'm proud to say that this year, we're down to 14 schools that qualify for the Innovative School District, representing 9 districts across the state. So that's a significant decrease in the number of schools that now qualify based on the statutory guidelines. The list of qualifying schools is going to be available on our website, but here I will show you the list of 14 schools. And again, these are the ones that qualify based on the criteria in statute. You may recall at this time last year, we released that list of 48, and between that time period in September until October, I came back to the board with a list of 6 schools that were going to be under consideration. Based on lessons learned last year and everything that we've done, we've been able to already be able to present to you today that list of schools under consideration using these criteria. We look at the 3-year trend. So we see schools that qualify by statutory requirements. Then we looked at the schools on that list that had a D letter grade in the 17-18 school year. We also looked at those schools that were rated an F but met growth. So what you start to find is that we're really starting to drill down looking at those schools that had an F and not meeting growth last school year. And from there, looking at the 2 years before that, we removed schools on that list that remained and still qualified, looking at the 15-16 and the 16-17 data, and if they met academic growth and earned a D letter grade, we wanted to look at that trend. Did they have 1 year that just really took a significant dip last year, or what was the trend telling us over that 3-year period? And so from that, and applying these filters to the same criteria that we have directly out of statute, we go from those 14 schools down to the list of urban and rural schools reflected on this list. You'll see in the rural areas, we have Carver Heights Elementary in Wayne County. We have Gaston Middle in Northampton County, and this is an example of a 5 through 8 model based on that criterion statute with any grades of, again, kindergarten through 5th grade. We have Hillcrest Elementary in Alamance, Burlington County, Williford Elementary and Nash Rocky Mount with Nash Rocky Mount schools. And then on urban list, we have Fairview Elementary in Guilford County and Hall Woodward Elementary in Forsyth County. Where we go from here, if you may recall, last year I was standing before you in October presenting this kind of list. Now what we have is an additional month to be able to engage in the communities, spend time with the school boards, meet with the superintendents, engage at the school level, work with Dr. Barber and her team, who's going to be going out and helping us to establish and complete comprehensive needs assessments using the state format that we use when developing those assessments for the schools. And at the same time, going even deeper into looking at how do we present to the county commissioners in these communities and being able to create forums to collect public feedback on potential considerations so that when we come back in October, we will be at a place where we're moving into a deeper discussion about potential recommendations around final selection. Because by statute, I have until October 15th to be able to notify those local districts, those local superintendents and school boards, of the intent of having to come back in November. October 15th is the deadline to notify them if I'm going to bring them forward in November for a recommendation for selection. So over these next 45 days or less, there's going to be significant engagement across these 6 areas, engaging with the leadership in those districts, engaging with the schools, and having community conversations about where do we go, so that together we can look at how do we replicate some of those things that we know have worked very, very well in helping to start a foundation and turning around Southside Ashpole, but really making it a reform and a strategy that's owned at the community level. When we had these conversations, again, over a year ago, we talked about the ISD being very different than other reform models around the country. This is very much an intentional strategy around building community capacity to own this reform and be proud of what it is that we can do together, because in the end, we are simply going in to create the conditions. Yes, we have a responsibility to oversee the operations of that school, but at the same time, that is a local asset, that is a resource that belongs to that community, and it's a resource that belongs to the parents and families that are being served by the school. So we want to remain true to that and continue to engage in those partnerships as we go forward. As I just mentioned, this is what the next 45 days will look like. It's going to be intensive conversations, a lot of dialogue, a lot of engagement. And I look forward to this because this is where you really get down to what are some of the barriers that the schools are facing, and what are some of those barriers that we need to be considerate of as we go in and try to serve the local communities in this work. You may recall last year as well, we rolled out a multi-phase process, and this is a process that gets replicated every year. We're right now in that consideration phase where the school data has been released. We move now into that evaluation phase, working with the districts and the schools that are under consideration. By the time we get to November, we'll be looking at any potential selection recommendation back to the state board. Engagement is once selection is finalized, we start to engage very closely with the local district. We start to look at the operator models, and we start to look at how do we come together so that by the time we have all agreements and contracts in place to do this work, we're engaged in that partnership strategy for the next 5 years. And in that 4th year of the 5-year period, looking at how do we transition the school back under the local district. And so mapping this out, again, here we are a year later. We've had a lot of lessons learned. I think being able to really define the schools that we're going to really engage with for consideration helps to make all districts aware of those that are going to be involved in these types of conversations. And I have reached out to every superintendent that has a school on that list. I think we're at a point where the conversations have been healthy, they've been strong, they've been good, but we're going to focus our energy now on those 6 schools that are under consideration and really, support and cheer on the other schools that are not, in hopes that next year we have even fewer schools that are on this list when we come back for this discussion. One other piece that we have right now is that we do have a requirement in statute to have at least 2 more schools for next year, with the 2 schools that's starting the year after. So we can anticipate at least 2 schools that I'll be back before this board with in the coming months with a recommendation for a selection after all of these conversations have taken place in the local communities and with local leadership. This is a timeline. It's on the PowerPoint. I know a lot of that is very hard to read from here, but it really just maps out everything that we're doing over the next 7 or 8 months until we get ready for next school year. And this reflects all the lessons learned from this last year and how we've updated this timeline to really take into consideration the work that we're going to do going forward in the months ahead with our partners. So with that, I conclude my presentation on the introduction and the announcement of our ISD qualifying schools and those that are going to be under consideration for future discussion.
Questions from my board members? Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hall. And I must go on record saying that Southside Ashpole is like all sectors of Robeson County. My students at UNCP, my graduate students, many of them either know folks who work there or they live in the community, and it's just like a different section, a different section of the place. So much to be thankful for, and so much is because of your hard work and the hard work of those in the agency who've supported you along the way. My question, though, is help me remember the legislation. Seems like there's something in the law that prohibits districts and schools that were on the list last year cannot be on the list this year, cannot be qualifying schools this year.
So we'll make sure I can answer. To answer your question, so it's not that they can't be on the list of qualifying again. In this case, because Robeson County Public Schools has a school on the list, we have an ISD school in Robeson County.
Right.
It's Robeson County that would not be eligible to have any of their schools on the list this year for consideration. So any LEA that becomes a part of this strategy with the ISD can only have 1 school in the ISD, and that basically prevents any schools over that 5-year period, unless the local district wants to opt to include others. But that's the choice that they can make.
Thank you.
Good question. Others? Dr. Hall, thank you so much. I know firsthand the background work that you have done to be an efficient and effective communicator, especially with the release of the data and making sure that superintendents were aware that their schools may possibly be identified. You know, there's that saying that you don't know what you know until you know. And so last year, the challenge for you was, and for us as a board, was we really did not know how Southside Ashpole would look. And now with the 6 schools that have been identified for this coming school year, many of those uncertainties and maybe unfounded fears have been laid to rest, and you can get down to the diligence and duty of making good things happen for students. One of the most positive changes that's happened at Southside Ashpole is that the school did not have a sense of prominence or importance in the community, and the relationships that have been brokered by common language about student success have put that school in the center of the community, and I expect many good things to come out of that for the community as a whole, not just for the school. Dr. Hall, again, just thank you for that report. Okay.
Thank you.
And then, speaking of Southside Ashpole, share the good stuff, Dr. Hall, because so many good things have happened, and we want to hear from you where we are on this 7th day of school.
Yes, ma'am. Well, let me start by also just recognizing, Dr. Oxendine, Ms. White, I know you had a chance to come down and join us for one of our staff development days and come in and see firsthand the team that's working in the school. And I appreciate you taking that time. I know that meant a lot to the team members at the school. It meant a lot to the school director. And I know it meant a lot to me and to our team to know that the board is really taking an active role in being engaged in this work with us as we're trying to support this school and really create the right conditions for success. So I appreciate that. We are definitely, we are in the midst of everything that goes into every other school across the state and getting your school open and ready for the first days of school. We did the additional 2 weeks of training with all of our staff in the school, and that was really about teaching our staff coming together about the curriculum, the strategies, and what we're going to be doing in the year ahead to help improve outcomes and really focusing on academic growth. We've had open house for parents in the community. That was on August 21st. Great turnout from the local community, even to the point where we also had some student uniform fittings at the school. You may recall last month I mentioned that the community asked for uniforms at the school. Our partners at AAC ensured that they removed that roadblock for parents and provided each student with 3 uniforms to kind of get the year started. And the community has come around that. I mean, that has been really a high point for the parents and others in that local, not only in the town, but town leadership, faith community, parents, everybody has just really come out in support of these first few days of school and what they're seeing already with the culture change that they've been hoping for at Southside Ashpole. Continuing, we finalized our staff recruitment. We had all classrooms staffed on the first day of school. We had personnel in there. We've got everything in place. And of course, like all schools, we will have our months ahead where we will continue to have lessons learned and see how we tweak and refine the curriculum, because we know that some of the gaps that some of our students may face, they're going to require a lot of differentiation in some of the curriculum and the instruction. But so far, things have really been on point, and we've had a good first couple weeks and really a good first month with the staff. With that, we've had to work to manage the school-based budget. You may recall we've had to really work to establish what does it mean to have business protocols and procedures in place like every other LEA in the state. So we have the same requirements for reporting, the same requirements for drawing down cash. We have payroll and accounting systems that are external to DPI as an LEA, where we're processing payroll on Innovative School District check stock. I mean, everything that, again, an LEA would be doing across the state. So those are things that took a lot of operational planning this year. We had to work very diligently to help not only this, this work with the local community kind of involved, but we've also had to work with other state agencies, working with the Treasurer's Office, Office of State Budget Management, a lot of individuals that we're trying to get them to understand who we are and what we are so that we could really make sure that we remove barriers so that payroll and everything else that we had to do would be in place. The working relationships with the district. You know, this has been something to me that really sets an example of how we do this work hand in hand with the local school system. You know, you've heard me mention the custodial and the grounds maintenance staff. Those are district employees that we are paying back to the district to continue those services. We have a pre-K program, as mentioned earlier, that's operating on school grounds, that is operated by the local school system. Child nutrition services, this is all being provided by the local district. And transportation and bus routes. You know, there's an adjustment in our ADM that goes back to the local district to help offset those transportation costs so that the district can operate transportation for the school just like it has in years past. But that all comes together with a lot of coordination. Something else that I'm excited about, and hopefully we're back before the board here in the next couple months, is to talk about the innovation zone that I know the local school superintendent wants to engage in. So that is something, you know, being down there just recently in meetings, we will be back to talk about what does a zone strategy in the public schools of Robeson County, what does that look like, and how do we stagger that work over the next several years. I will tell you, when you look at most zone strategies across the nation, they tend to focus in urban areas. North Carolina is going to create a new narrative on what it means to come together in a rural community and be able to partner in a way and create these conditions for success and be able to tell that story, just like we're doing at Southside Asheville, but in this case, doing it with a zone that's going to come out and help impact other schools within that local system as partners with the ISD. So again, we're excited about that. You know, this is some of the pictures from our staff training day. It may be hard to see up here, but if you look at them online, you'll see some of the activities. Again, Dr. Oxendine, Ms. White, being there to help, you know, engage with our staff. Very proud of the team that's in place. And then first days of school, you can see some of the pictures of the students in the uniforms, sitting in class, our school director, Mr. Major, who is there with student. But this is, again, that feeling of community, parents bringing their kids into the school and students being very proud of being a scholar at Southside Asheville and the work that we have ahead to help close, again, the achievement gaps. So with that, that is my update on Southside Asheville. Great year being initiated. We've had a great launch. Last year we launched the district. This year we launched our first school. And of course, in the months ahead, we'll talk about the next round of partners that we'll be engaged with. Some other things at the ISD level, just for some quick updates. Recruitment activities. We have been really focused on not only looking at schools that are going to qualify for next year. We had an event back on August 14th, and Ms. White, I appreciate you being able to show up, you know, and attend. We had an event where we were trying to educate others about what does it mean to be an innovative school operator in North Carolina. You may recall we have multiple options on what an operator can look like. We have options where it could be a proven school turnaround leader that we work with to come in and be an operator with us. It could be a university or college. It could be local, state, or national nonprofit organization. It could be a charter management organization or an education management organization. Even with changes in the law in the last session, the ISD can also serve as an operator in the event we don't have the match that we're looking for in a local community. So the good news is, as part of being an innovative school district, means that we have the agility to tailor the partnerships and the relationships that we need to create those conditions for success in the schools that we're working in. And a lot of that work is about how do we create these conversations and change the narrative on what does it mean to be an innovative school operator, not just an operator with the ISD. And this is, again, using that agility and that ability to design based on the relationships that we know are critical to get this work done at the school level. This is a reminder of the organizational structure. When you think about the ISD, again, it is a school system. It's the 116th district under the administration of the state board and the state superintendent. We have the operator that is under contract with the State Board of Education once selected. From there, they hire the principal or the school director. But all the staff that work at the school, meaning the teachers, teacher assistants, school counselor, anybody else that's in that school, they are direct employees of the ISD. And those are the staff that we are processing payroll. They are actually able to get state benefits and everything that a state employee would be receiving. With that, we have the ISD Handbook, which will be coming before you in the months ahead as well. That's going to really outline what does it mean to be an employee of the ISD, everything that outlines human resources, the benefits, our payroll processes, and then getting into these topics around everything from equal employment opportunity to dress code, teacher absences, leave, anything and everything that we know teachers and schools across the state have to navigate with all employees. Those things are no different for us. We are just doing it under the administration of a state agency and doing this work in a way that helps to ensure that we're creating an environment to keep staff in place, support them, and make sure that people do not lose the benefits that in some cases they've become accustomed to having in working in a local school system. So again, you'll hear more about this in the months ahead, including the emergency procedures that will be implemented not only at Southside, but we also will make sure that we look at this and any school that we work with to align with what's happening at the local district level. If buses aren't going to drive and be out on the roads on a certain day because of weather, obviously that impacts our school as well. This is where those alignments and policies and procedures will take place. So I appreciate the opportunity to again stand before you and talk about the work that's taken place, and also start talking about where do we go in the months ahead as we come into this next phase of our work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Any final questions, comments? Mr. Chair, this concludes the report.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. White. That concludes our committee reports. Thanks to the board members, DPI staff, and other contributors that participated in today's meeting. I ask for a motion to go into closed session, and note for the audience and online listeners that following closed session, this meeting of September the 5th, we will adjourn immediately. And so, Mr. Davis, do you have a motion, please?
Yes, sir. I move that the State Board of Education go into closed session to discuss personnel matters and to consult with our attorneys on attorney-client privilege matters, including Carter G. Woodson versus North Carolina State Board of Education, Francis Adkins versus Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf, and Hoke County versus State of North Carolina and North Carolina State Board of Education.
Okay, motion by Mr. Davis, a second by Mr. Alcorn. Dr. Townsend Smith, please call the roll.
Dr. Oxendine? Ms. Taylor?
Here. Yes. Yes. Not here.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
I'm here too. Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes, but please note that I'll recuse myself from the part on the Leandro,
Hoke County.
Hoke County.
Oak County.
Oak County.
Same thing.
It's the same thing.
I'll recuse myself.
Okay, right.
Portion of the closed session.
Ms. White?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chastain? Mr. Alcorn? Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
Chairman Kobe?
Yes. Okay, the motion stands approved. I'm gonna give you a 5-minute break. Look, we've gone way over, so 5-minute break and we'll convene in the board conference room.
Take it home.